Oliver Whitmore was crossing London's most elegant square when a child's voice stopped him like a bullet to the heart. A 6-year-old girl in a yellow dress was pointing at him, whilst her mother paled as if she'd seen a ghost. Oliver turned slowly, and in that moment, his billionaire world collapsed. This woman was Emma, the love he'd abandoned 7 years earlier without knowing she was pregnant. And this girl had his same green eyes, his same crooked smile, the same mole on her left cheek. After 7 years of success built on a lie, the truth had just exploded in front of everyone like a bomb. It was a September morning when Oliver Whitmore, 52 years old with a fortune of $1.2 billion, left his penthouse in Belgravia for what he thought would be a normal day. Oliver was the undisputed emperor of British property, the man who had transformed the dream of bricks and mortar into an empire stretching from London to Edinburgh. But 7 years earlier, Oliver had been just an ambitious 30-something with big dreams and an almost empty bank account. And there was Emma Thompson, 28 years old, primary school teacher, dark hair always tied in a ponytail. They'd met in a small cafe in Camden. She was marking homework. He was studying projects that existed only in his head. For 2 years, they'd been inseparable. Emma believed in his dreams when no one else took them seriously. She waited up for him when he came home late from meetings, cooked dinner with whatever they had, consoled him when projects failed. Then came the opportunity of his lifetime. Swiss investors interested in his project. But there was one non-negotiable condition. The head of the investors didn't do business with people distracted by sentimental attachments. He wanted partners entirely devoted to work. Oliver found himself facing the most difficult decision of his life. Emma or the empire of his dreams. He chose the empire. One October evening, he came home and told Emma it was all over, that he wasn't ready for a serious commitment. Emma burst into tears, begged him, but Oliver stood firm. What Oliver didn't know was that Emma was 3 weeks pregnant. Too proud to call him after being cast aside so brutally, she decided to raise this girl alone. And now, 7 years later, as Oliver walked through his square in Belgravia, fate had decided to present him with the bill. Emma was coming out of the small corner shop when she saw him. For a second, time stopped. Beside her, a girl in a yellow dress with a small red rucksack observed everything with the typical curiosity of 6-year-olds. Oliver recognized her immediately. His heart began beating like a pneumatic drill. He could have pretended not to have seen her, continued walking. But then the girl spoke. Little Sophie was staring at him with innocent curiosity, finger pointed at him without any shyness. Emma tried to pull her away, but Oliver had already seen everything he needed to see. The girl's green eyes, identical to his, the small mole on her left cheek, in exactly the same spot, the crooked smile when she smiled, an unmistakable genetic trait of the Whitmore family. Oliver knelt down to the girl's height, his heart exploding in his chest. Sophie observed him with that simple logic of children, remarking that he smelled like Daddy and had eyes like hers. Emma could no longer hold back her tears. 7 years of secrets, white lies, invented explanations were crumbling in an instant. Oliver felt the world spinning around him. He had lost 7 years of his daughter's life, 7 years of first steps, first words, first days at school, all for an empire that now, looking at this wonderful girl, seemed completely empty. When Emma confirmed that Sophie was his daughter, Oliver stood there, in the middle of the square, with the impression that his entire world had just collapsed. In a few minutes, he had discovered he was a father and had lost again everything that truly mattered. Oliver couldn't sleep for 3 days. He kept seeing Sophie's green eyes, hearing her innocent voice. He had cancelled all appointments, ignored calls from his directors, neglected the business that was usually his reason for living. His assistant Grace was worried, but Oliver dismissed every attempt to return him to normality. He needed to sort out a personal matter, he said. Personal. Oliver Whitmore had never had anything personal in his life. He began searching for them. London is big, but the world of 6-year-olds is small. He checked all the primary schools in the area, all the playgrounds, all the places where a single mother might take her daughter. Nothing. He hired a private investigator, the best in London. He put £50,000 cash on the table as an advance, demanding to find them within a week. Whilst waiting for news, Oliver began doing something he hadn't done for years, reflecting on his life. He lived in a £10 million penthouse, but always dined alone. He owned 4 luxury cars, but had no one to share a journey with. He had built an empire, but was the loneliest emperor in Britain. On the 4th day, the investigator called. Emma lived in a council flat in Tower Hamlets and taught at St. Mary's Primary School. The girl attended the same school. Oliver dressed as if he were going to a billion-pound business meeting. In reality, what he was about to do was infinitely more important. At 3:30 p.m., the children began coming out. Oliver observed them all from his Maserati, feeling completely out of place in front of this modest school. Then he saw her. Sophie was running towards the gate with her satchel bouncing on her shoulders, laughing with a classmate. She threw herself into Emma's arms, who lifted her and spun her around, both laughing. Oliver felt a stab in his heart watching this scene. It was everything he had always wanted, without knowing it. He got out of the car and approached. Emma saw him immediately, and her smile disappeared. Sophie looked from one to the other, confused, recognizing this man from yesterday, the one who smelled like Daddy. Emma sent Sophie to play and confronted Oliver. Her words were sharp as blades. He had chosen money over her, built his empire on their destroyed love. And when Oliver hesitated to answer whether he would have chosen differently knowing about the pregnancy, that silence said everything. But Sophie came running back to them, innocently asking if this sad gentleman could come for dinner. Emma, fighting an internal battle, gave in. "Just once," she said, "but don't think this changes anything." Oliver felt his heart leap in his chest. It was just dinner, but for him it was the chance to begin knowing the daughter he'd never had the opportunity to love. Emma's home was the opposite of Oliver's penthouse, a small 2-bedroom council flat, walls colored by Sophie's drawings, simple furniture, but full of warmth. Oliver felt like a giant in a doll's house, but strangely more at home than he'd ever felt in his luxury mansion. Sophie had taken him by the hand and was dragging him around the whole house like a little tour guide. In her room, she showed him a drawing stuck above the bed. Her family composed of herself, Mummy, and a Daddy without a face, just a shadow. When Oliver asked why Daddy had no face, Sophie replied that she didn't know what he looked like, because he'd been away on business for a long time. Oliver looked at Emma from the doorway, who was watching the scene with moist eyes. Dinner was very simple: spaghetti with tomato sauce, salad, homemade bread. But for Oliver, it was the most delicious meal of his life. Sophie chattered non-stop, talking about school, friends, the PE teacher. When she asked what job he did, Oliver simply said, "He built houses." "Like the 3 little pigs?" Sophie asked. "A bit bigger," Oliver smiled. After dinner, whilst Emma put Sophie to bed, Oliver stayed in the kitchen washing up. He hadn't done it for 20 years, but the movements came naturally. When Emma returned, she found him drying the last glass. They sat on the small living room sofa, a strange silence between them. There were 7 years of distance, pain, lives lived separately. Oliver said he wanted to be part of their lives. Emma shook her head, explaining what it meant to truly be a father, being present on fevered nights, with difficult homework, with tears over broken friendships. Where was he when Sophie took her first steps, said her first word, cried on her first day at nursery? Every word from Emma was like a stab. Oliver realized he had lost everything that couldn't be bought with all his millions. He admitted he'd been wrong, but didn't want to lose the future. Emma offered him a month to prove he'd changed, a month to get to know his daughter. If afterwards she thought it was better for him to disappear, he would. Oliver took his phone and cancelled all his commitments for the following month.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Emma showed him a photo of Sophie as a newborn in hospital, small and perfect, explaining that he'd lost that moment and could never get it back. But Oliver said he could be there for all the moments to come. A month to prove that Oliver Whitmore could be more than a selfish billionaire. The next day, Oliver presented himself outside the school with flowers for Emma and a doll for Sophie. He'd never been so nervous, not even before his first major corporate acquisition. During that first month, Oliver discovered a completely new world. He discovered that taking Sophie to school in the morning was more rewarding than any business meeting, that helping her with maths homework was more stimulating than studying million-pound balance sheets. That reading her a bedtime story was the most beautiful moment of the day. But it wasn't easy. The first weekend, he took Sophie to a Michelin-starred restaurant, where she ordered chicken nuggets and ate them with her hands, staining her nice dress. Oliver felt uncomfortable because of the other diners' stares, but when Sophie looked at him with those green eyes full of happiness calling him Daddy, he understood he'd got it all wrong. It was the first time Sophie had called him that. Oliver's eyes became moist. The following weekend, he took her to McDonald's, and Sophie was the happiest girl in the world. Emma watched everything from a distance, ready to intervene at the first sign of disinterest. But week after week, she saw him change. She saw him get up at 6 in the morning to take Sophie to school. She saw him cancel important meetings for school plays. She saw him sleep on the sofa when Sophie had a fever. The biggest test came when Sophie fell ill, a simple flu that became complicated. Emma was beside herself with worry, and Oliver was no less concerned. Both spent the night awake beside Sophie's bed, taking turns to check her temperature. Around 3 in the morning, Sophie whispered that she was frightened. Oliver replied honestly that he was frightened too, but that when you're scared you must stay together. Fear is less frightening when you're not alone. Sophie fell asleep holding Oliver's hand, who stayed there all night watching her breathe, praying for her to be well. The next morning, Emma found Oliver asleep in the chair, still holding Sophie's hand. That was the moment she understood that Oliver Whitmore had truly changed. He was no longer the ambitious man who had chosen success over love. He had become a father. The trial month ended without anyone noticing. Oliver was already part of the daily routine, and gradually, Emma too began to relax, to trust again. One evening, they decided it was time to tell Sophie the truth. When they revealed that Oliver was her real daddy, Sophie simply replied that she already knew. She knew because he smelled like Daddy, had eyes like hers, and because when she was with him, she felt complete. Oliver held her tight, his eyes full of tears. Emma watched them, and for the first time in 7 years, her heart didn't ache. 6 months after that revelation, Oliver's life was completely transformed. He had sold the Belgravia penthouse and bought a house with a garden. Not the sumptuous mansion he could have afforded, but a normal house with a white fence and a swing. Sophie spent 3 nights a week with him, and each time was a celebration. Oliver had learned to cook badly, but with love, to play with dolls, to invent bedtime stories. He had discovered that earning his daughter's smile was worth more than any business profit. But above all, Oliver and Emma were slowly rediscovering their lost love. It hadn't been easy. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, moments when the past seemed an insurmountable wall. But Sophie was their meeting point, the miracle that was bringing them back together. One Sunday morning over breakfast, Sophie asked the question that had been on both their minds for weeks. Why didn't they all live together like other families? With a child's simple logic, she had summed everything up. You love each other. I love you. You love me. Isn't that how families work? Oliver took Emma's hand. Both knew the moment had come. 2 months later, Emma and Sophie moved into Oliver's house. It wasn't just cohabitation, it was the birth of a real family. Oliver transformed his study into a princess bedroom. Emma put her books next to the economics ones, and together they created what neither had managed to build alone: a home full of love. Oliver's work changed radically. He delegated much, worked from home when possible, and above all began investing in social projects. He built a free nursery in Emma's neighborhood, funded scholarships, transformed part of his profits into concrete help for families in need. The truth was that Oliver had always had a good heart, but it had taken 52 years to find it. A year after their first encounter in Belgravia Square, Oliver organized a garden party. Watching Sophie play with other children, Emma approached saying that everything had happened as it should. If he'd stayed 7 years earlier, he would have become a father out of duty, not love. He had to build his empire to understand it was empty. That evening Oliver proposed. Not a £1,000,000 diamond, but a simple gold ring with a small brilliant. Emma said yes through tears, whilst from the window Sophie spied on them with a gigantic smile. The wedding was simple, at the registry office, with Sophie as maid of honor. When the registrar asked if they promised to love each other for life, Sophie shouted that they promised even more. Their love had survived 7 years of separation, had overcome pride, pain, misunderstandings. It could survive anything. 3 years after the wedding, the Whitmore family was the perfect example of how love can transform everything. Sophie, now 9 years old, was a confident and happy girl. Oliver, 55 years old, had found the perfect balance between professional success and family happiness. The company continued to flourish, but now Oliver invested most of the profits in social projects. He had created the Sophie Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers and children in need. Emma ran the educational side, putting her experience at the service of those who needed it most. One evening, Sophie said that her teacher had called their family special because they had chosen each other. The love you choose is stronger than the love that just happens to you, the teacher had explained. Oliver looked at Emma, who was smiling with moist eyes. They had chosen to love each other twice, the first time young and naive, the second time as adults aware of the value of what they had. During Sophie's 10th birthday party, the girl stood on a chair to make a speech. She said she was lucky because she had the best parents in the world. Her daddy had been lost, but she and Mummy had found him. Now, they were a real family forever. That evening, Sophie made an unexpected request. She wanted a little brother or sister. She had so much love left over and wanted to teach someone else how beautiful it was to have a family like theirs. 6 months later, Emma discovered she was pregnant. Oliver cried with joy for the second time in his life. The first when he'd met Sophie. The second when he learned he would have another child to love. Little James was born in spring, with Mummy's blue eyes and Daddy's crooked smile. Sophie was the proudest big sister in the world, and Oliver the happiest father. In the delivery room, holding his second child, Oliver thought back to that day in Belgravia Square when Sophie had asked why he smelled like Daddy. That innocent question had destroyed his empty life and built the real one. He thanked Emma for giving him the chance to become the man he was meant to be. She replied that he'd done the same for her, teaching her that true love knows how to wait for the right moment. 5 years after that first dinner in the small 2-bedroom flat, the Whitmore family lived in a house full of laughter, where business successes were important, but not as important as James's first steps or Sophie's school grades. Oliver had learned that you can't buy love, but you can earn it, that you can't recover lost time, but you can make what remains precious. And above all, he had learned that a child can save your soul, if you have the courage to let yourself be saved. Every evening he went to the bedrooms to say goodnight. Sophie, now 14, often pretended to sleep, but smiled, feeling the kiss on her forehead. James always woke up to hug him tight. Oliver Whitmore had built a £1 billion empire, but his real wealth slept in those 2 bedrooms and rested beside him every night. The man who 7 years earlier had chosen success over love had now discovered that love is the greatest success you can achieve. And it all began with a 6-year-old girl who had recognized the smell of daddy. If this story has shown you that true love knows no time and knows how to wait for the right moment, smash that like button with all your strength. Share to prove that second chances can change everything. Tell us in the comments, do you think Oliver deserved a second chance? Do you believe love can truly transform a person? Which moment touched you most? Subscribe now for more incredible stories of families reuniting, fathers discovering what it truly means to love, and proof that destiny always knows what it's doing.